Hi, I'm Pete. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey.
Jeez, here I am again. Thank all of you that didn't leave at the break. We have like, sometimes I get like a leaving ovation, you know. I'm like part of the repertory here, you know, like at the Met, they always have La Boheme and Aida, you know, and like I'm like here all the time. Just like an opera, it's tragic too, you know, and unfortunately the lyrics don't change much either, you know, it's the same story. There's like one poor guy here that's heard me speak at the studio group on Friday night and then at Ohio Street last night. It must be like Groundhog Day for him, you know. I tell him, leave, dude, I would, you know. I would if I could. Thanks a lot, Mindy. I really liked your talk. It was really nice.
Who's got the toilet block from back here? Like to leave?
What?
You know, didn't I tell you? You know. And it's not just a want to go home, it's a have to get the hell out of here. You know what I mean? So, you'll see why in a minute. Well, I'm not from California. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Actually, I'm still growing up, but in a little town that the Almanac of American Politics calls a rural industrial slum. But I didn't live in the slum part. We lived in the nice part of the town. My dad was an industrialist, and, you know, it was, all I can say about when I grew up, it was like Ozzie and Harriet or Leave It to Beaver. You know, like my aunts and uncles. My grandfather was the town doctor, and he lived right across the bridge, and my grandparents were Russian immigrants, and they lived up the street, and I had all these aunts and uncles that lived all over the place, including next door, and our backyards were adjacent, and we would come home from school, and maybe I would eat at my cousin's house for lunch and my other aunt's house for dinner, and we'd sleep over, and we just rode our bicycles around till 11 at night and played Army in the woods and swam in the creek, and the New York Times Sunday magazine did a little article about my hometown because there was no crime. They never had a crime in our town. You know, all the police did was just take you home when you had too much to drink. And they did a lot of that because we drank a lot. This little town had 4 steel mills, and each steel mill had 4 plant gates, one for each direction of the compass. And each plant gate had 3 taverns on each of the corners across from the plant gate. So this little town of 10,000 people had about 40 taverns. And this should like a Guinness Book of World's Record or something. Probably some towns that size just have 1 tavern, but this one had 40, our town. And you know, you could get a draft of beer for 15 cents and a shot for 30 cents, and then these places all thrived. And every morning at 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon and 11 at night, when the mill whistles blew, everybody shuffled back and forth from the plant gate to the bar. I don't know when they ever went home, and that's where life happened. You know, my grandpa Voidovich, who I was named after, and appropriately so, because he always had a glow on, he would take my cousins and me up to the bucket of blood and would sit on the step outside while Grandpa went inside. And Grandma would sort of bust him sometime and would say, "Oh, Grandma, we've just been here for 1 minute," you know. And I always think that I've been covering up for alcoholics ever since, mostly myself. And so that was sort of it. And it was, one thing, so there wasn't really anything weird about that would predispose me to alcohol in terms of the way I grew up, except for the kind of kid I was. I was a really neurotic kid. I always felt like everybody, I felt different than all the other kids. I felt separate from all the other kids. I felt like they were all better friends with each other than they were with me. And I always felt like something bad was getting ready to happen, always. I remember the school nurse would come in and she would whisper something to the teacher, and I was sure she told her they just found out that I was terminally ill, you know, and I'd tell the kid in front of me, "I'm going to die, aren't I?" You know, and the kid was like, "What?" You know, and we would, you know, I would go over to my grandfather's for the night, and he'd go to deliver a baby or have to go to the emergency room, but he'd have to stop and drop me off on the way because I was like way too scared to stay in his house by myself at age 12 or something, you know. And I would sleep over, you know how you sleep over at your friend's house? So I'd sleep over at my friend's house, And at 4 in the morning, the parents would bring me home. I'd be like throwing up, you know, because just staying 3 doors down the street, you know, created too much anxiety for me at age 10 years old, you know. And we'd go on vacations, and we'd have to come home a day or like the day after we got there, we'd have to come home because I have a pain in my side that wouldn't go away, you know. They even took my appendix out in hopes that we could then go on vacations, you know. And you know, it was like that. And you know, and then I went to high school, and it wasn't any better. You know, I was just like a social moron. You know, I had like horn-rimmed glasses and braces, and I hung around with the really cool guys, like the way cool guys I ran around with, but I wasn't one of them. I was like a sidekick, you know, like Patsy Weber. And it was it was time to go away to college, and I didn't know why you're supposed to go, so, and I went and I told the guidance counselor, I want to go to school in Ohio. And she said, well, why? And I said, because, you know, you can drink at 18 in Ohio. And she was like mortified. She said, you know, I've been doing this for 40 years, no one's ever told me that. I said, well, I thought, boy, she's lived a sheltered life, you know. My brother went to college and law school before me, and he did the whole thing with a beer in his hand and had a great time, you know, and I thought that's the way to do it. You know, in our town, it was just drinking was, I mean, you know, that's just all anybody did. You know, my parents drank, and I mean, we weren't, the Lurches, their children, the Lurches didn't drink, so we weren't allowed to play with their kids, you know, because they were freaks, you know, and it was like that. And so I went away to college, and I did okay, you know, I pledged a fraternity, and I got good grades, and I played sports. And in the spring of my freshman year, I went into the college bar there with this guy named Steve Strong. I'll never forget, he drove a little blue car, drank Duke beer, like you all really need to know that. And so we went in, and there I met Eve, who was to be an important person in my life. And Eve was from the Bronx, and she was probably about 65 years old, and she had platinum blonde hair, and she had been a stripper or something, you know. And she said to me, what do you have, honey? And, you know, it was like love at first sight, you know, and I said, and I knew I could see that I was going to get served, and not just a 3.2% beer that you're allowed to drink when you're 18, but served. And I said, why, I'll have a shot. Yeah, that's it, a shot. And she said, a shot of what, honey? And I said, why, a shot of gin. Yeah, that's it, a shot of gin. So, had a shot of gin, had about 15 of them. Now, I always say, it wasn't Tanqueray or Boodles or anything. It was like Old Cuyahoga or whatever, you know, they have in Cleveland. And so I got drunk. So we're riding around in this guy's car, and I'm throwing up out the window, and I'm telling him, look at the stars, look at that star, look at that star over there, you know, smell the flowers, oh, this is great, you know, you're the best friend I ever had. I only knew this guy for like a week, right, you know? Well, I was euphoric. The only other time I'd ever been euphoric was when I got my appendix out, and they gave me the Demerol, you know, and I told the nurse, you have beautiful teeth and beautiful hair, and I told the doctor, thank you, you know, cut anything you like, thank you so much, you know, and for what you're going to do. And you know what, I didn't feel separate from everybody else or different from everyone else, or that everybody was better friends with each other than they were with me, and I didn't feel like something bad was getting ready to happen. In fact, I thought something good was getting ready to happen, you know? And so, of course, the next night, I was right back on that bar stool, and I always say I squeezed 4 years of college into 7 years, and that's what I did. And, you know, the disease progressed just like the book said it did. I had all the personality characteristics of an alcoholic after a very short period of drinking, you know. I was dishonest, you know, you have to, if you're going to live the life of a drunk, you can't tell the truth all the time. Like I would tell the professor, you know, my dog ate my paper. I remember one time this professor asked me, how many grandmothers did you have? Because my grandmother kept dying, and that's why I didn't come to class. And you know, actually, being dishonest came very naturally for me. Even when I was a little, I never really understood why anybody would tell the truth when telling something else would get them further. Do you know what I mean? Like if story A will do you more good than story B, then why not tell it? Like, I don't understand why the truth would have anything to do with anything. You know, I never understood that. So lying came really easily for me. So anyway, I also felt sorry for myself. Poor me, another old Cuyahoga Eve. And I also had seething resentments, which I always forget. what they are until, like, some of the newer guys I sponsor, I see what seething resentments are, which you just can't say the person's name without swearing and spitting, you know, like, how's your Uncle Tom? Oh, that son of a bitch, you know, and the guy spits, and then you realize, well, it's way too early, you know, for this guy to look at his part of this. It's just like homicide prevention at this point, you know. And so, I mean, I had, just don't, you know, go to meetings every day and don't kill them, and we'll talk about it next. Well, those are the kind of resentments I had. And so it got worse. I remember, like, in my second senior year or something, I was watching TV, and I saw George McGovern ad on TV, and it was, you know, he was saying, let's kick Richard Nixon out of office and stop the war. It all sounded good to me, you know, so I volunteered to work for George McGovern for president. He reminded me a lot of my dad, who had passed away that year. So they sent me to Oregon. Well, I'd never been west of Ohio before in my life, so I went to Oregon, and it was, the way I drank was, if I was happy, if I liked what I was doing, then I would control and enjoy my drinking. So I was sort of controlling and enjoying my drinking. And I always say that from the time I was a little kid, I read a lot of Jack London and Jack Kerouac and Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie, and I really had this precious perception of our country and its people, but I really wanted to see it myself. And I always wanted to be this person, like, went to sea or hot freight trains or something, you know. And so anyway, I became this, like, migrant community and political organizer, you know, and I would work for different candidates and causes around the country. It was kind of like a drinking tour of America, actually. And so, you know, I would work for, you know, somebody in Oregon, and I would drink how people drink in Oregon, and I would work for somebody in Florida, and that's just sort of how I did it. And I had a lot of good experiences, you know. I share some of them. Once, I remember I was working in the southwestern part of Virginia, and I was staying with some coal miner and his family, and, you know, the river that ran through the town was like a reddish yellow color, and the water came out of the spigot the same way, and there was the coal train that had like 500 cars, and it would snake along the river, and there were these steep hills that came up from the river, and everybody lived up on top of the hills, and everyone had a chain link fence in the back of their yard where they had the tombstones where their grandparents were buried and the great-grandparents were buried, and they had all these A.P. Carter lyrics on the tombstones, and I would live there with them and drink with them, and I learned how to play a dulcimer, and I learned what the patterns on the quilt meant, and I really had a great time. And then when I left there on the way to Florida, I took a train. I think it's called the City of New Orleans, but we always called it the Chicken Bone. And the reason we called it the Chicken Bone was everybody would eat fried chicken and then throw the bones underneath the seat. And I met this guy who was a porter, whose name was Chicken Bones Jones, and he liked me, and he took me up front where all the crew slept, and we got into a poker game and passed a bottle of whiskey all around and talked about Franklin Roosevelt, and I thought, oh man, I really arrived. You know, I mean, that to me was the greatest, you know. And I had a lot of fun. I also was a champion freeloader, you know, and I would go, like, let's say some guy is running for governor of Florida, and some rich guy, his contribution to the campaign is to take the out-of-state organizer and let him live at his house, which would be me. So I would move in, and I would, you know, eat everything in his refrigerator, and drink everything in his bar, and date his daughter, and walk his dog, and, you know, and I would just move right in. And I think a lot of times it's sort of my karma now that the newcomers come to my house and stay so long, you know. Like, hey, Pete, I'm not a newcomer anymore. I have 4 years. That's right. Time for you to get your own place, Bob, you know. So anyway, you know, I'm a pretty good BSer, so I let them talk me into managing political campaigns. I'd run somebody for governor in one state, and I run somebody for the Senate in some other state, and I was doing okay because, like, mostly I controlled and enjoyed my drinking, but the book says the disease progressed, and my disease progressed, and bad stuff started to happen. And I was in Virginia Beach, and I got into this spectacular bicycle accident, and I smashed my head, and I had slurred speech and short-term memory loss. But nobody noticed, because when you're drunk all the time, you slur your speech and you can't remember anything anyway. And my friend Henry, God bless him, we were running him for governor, and he liked Jimmy Carter, and he asked me if I would go out to the southwestern part of Virginia, and where Jimmy Carter wanted to have this big rally and announce his candidacy for president and organize this thing. And we thought we're going to get all the good Democrats from Virginia and West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee, and we're going to have music and clogging, and it'll be really great. And that I would be a good person to do it because I'd organized that area a lot, and they knew me and trusted me. Well, the truth of the matter was, I was really in a diminished state because A, I smashed my head, and B, I was drunk all the time on top of it. But I went anyway, and I screwed it all up. You know, I scheduled the music, the band, for the wrong day, and I sent a Volkswagen Bug to the airport to pick up 15 members of the press. And the story I always tell is when I was with the limousine driver at the airport, and we were out of beer, and the plane was like way late, like 5 minutes late. So I told the limousine driver, we're gonna get some beer, you know. Well, in those states, they have like blue laws and stuff. The guy probably had to drive 40 miles to find a 6-pack of beer somewhere. So anyway, the plane landed, and, you know, no car. And so I'm kind of, you know, humoring the guy, and I'm asking him, how's Rosalind and how's Amy? And finally he said, you know, Peter, where's a car? I go, oh, funny, I should ask, Governor. So we had to rent a car, and we had to use his credit card because I didn't have one. And the guy we were like an hour late for the rally. My friend was so mad at me. I blamed it on some other guy. That was Jim Gibbs' fault. And, you know, I wasn't even embarrassed or anything, you know. I just, like, we were out of beer, you know. Hey, he's Billy's brother. He should understand, you know. And, you know, the truth of the matter is, if I knew he would become president, I would have been really embarrassed. No one else who I ever worked for ever got elected, you know, and I didn't, you know, think it mattered. So, yeah, one more bad experience. There was this really nice man who Jerry D. knows all about. He was the United States Senator from Oklahoma named Fred Harris. And he asked me if I would, he was running for president. He was the guy that I really liked. And I'll bet Carter was relieved to find out I was now working on the other side. He's relieved. So I was in charge of Fred Harris's New Hampshire primary, and I went up there. And again, I was, you know, not in the greatest condition. And I got up there, and it was like 3 feet of snow. It's like 20 below zero. I rented like the St. Vincent de Paul storefront, and there were like all these, like, we lived in what we called the barracks, or these half-renovated apartments that were built during the World War II or afterwards. And we had more volunteers than all the other candidates put together. We had like about 3,000 kids. And we just ate en masse and everything, and it was, and he would call me and he would say, you know, Pete, I'm sending Arlo Guthrie up there tomorrow, and Will Geer, he's Grandpa on the Waltons. Yes, I know that, Fred. And he'd say, you know, that song, This Land Is Your Land, is not just a pretty song, and, you know, you're the guy that's going to give the country back to the people. And I was basically whatever, you know. I couldn't have run somebody for like GSR of the West District, you know, so I thought, well, maybe I just need to drink some more, you know, and I'll know what to do. So we had just come in from like Berlin, New Hampshire, where we tried to find somebody to make a radio ad in French or something, and I was so sick. I had like a fever of 104, so I mean, I was like beleaguered, like Washington at Valley Forge or something. And this guy Michael Federico and we sat up one night and we listened to the Bob Dylan Desire album, and we were just it was almost like, let's see how much wine we can drink in an hour. Ready? Go. I mean, I don't know why we were doing this. We drank so much red wine so fast. And the next morning I woke up and I was sitting at my desk, and the right side of my face got numb and the left side of my body got numb. And they took me to the hospital, and I was to not work for about 3 years. I was really, really sick. And whether I had some bleeding, or whether it was from smashing my head, or whether it was from alcohol poisoning, and this kind little doctor in Newton, Massachusetts, took me home with him, and he and his wife and kids tried to nurse me back to health, but they couldn't. And he said that I reminded him of someone who had come home from the war with shell shock. And so anyway, I just started this big tour of going to neurologists and neurosurgeons and psychiatrists and whatever. But the truth of the matter was, whatever was wrong with me was caused by alcoholism. So my girlfriend, I came to Santa Barbara because my girlfriend went to school at UCSB. She was like my girlfriend / nurse, you know, at this point. And I couldn't even drink a half of a can of beer without getting deathly sick. I would just get so sick as soon as I had a little bit of it. And I guess I'd finally experienced reverse tolerance or something like that. But I tried really hard to get my ability to drink back. And after a while, I could drink like 4 beers without getting sick. Well, who else but an alcoholic would consciously try to increase their tolerance for alcohol? Because we don't know how to live. I had no idea. Like, you know, that's really our dilemma. You know, we can't drink anymore because our livers quit, or we're getting locked up all the time, or whatever. But we can't not drink because we don't know how to live sober. So that's like the rock and the hard place that we're between when we get here. So now I'm drinking, so I'm way too important for Santa Barbara. So I moved to San Francisco, and I got 2 jobs. I got a job running an animal welfare agency, and I also got a job as a firefighter for the city. And if you're an alcoholic or an Al-Anon, we love to rescue people and things, you know. So that was great. I would like rescue dogs and cats all day and animals all night, and then go to the bar and talk and drink about it, and drink and talk about it, and it was great. And when I got back into school, I was going to USF, and everything was going along okay. And again, because I liked what I was doing, I was controlling and enjoying my drinking. Maybe I would only get drunk once a week or once every 2 weeks or something, and the rest I would just have 3 or 4 drinks every night. And then comes a part of my talk where my friend Art always makes the sign of the cross. I met this girl named Amy, and she came to work at the animal welfare agency that I worked at, and as a volunteer, and she went to school at Cal, and I mean, it was really bad. I had such a thing for this girl. It was just like an affliction, you know. If I never feel like it again, it would be okay. And I was so goofy, and you know. Anyway, and I always say we were about the same age. I was 33 and she was 18, you know, and so, you know, at some point in time, she didn't really see the future in our relationship, and so she ended it. And I didn't really do anything any good alcoholic wouldn't do, you know. I staked out her house to see who was bringing her home, and staked out all the other guys' house that I knew she knew, and got drunk and visited her at work, you know, and I call her parents up in the middle of the night, you know, which her father was president of the American Psychiatric Association, and I would talk. He wasn't a very good psychiatrist. He would just hang up. He would say, "Is this an emergency?" I'd say, "Yes, it is. Amy just left the bar with a coke dealer." "Well, call me tomorrow, son," or you know, just go to sleep, you know. I went down to Sunnyvale, where they have George Jones on the jukebox. If drinking don't kill me, her memory will. Stuff like that. I thought, I'm just going to get drunk with this girl, you know. And so I did. But what I didn't realize, that I was going to stay drunk for 3 years, you know. And actually, it was about 2 years. And I ended up, you know, losing both of my jobs, and now I'm out of school again. And it was really bad. I lost my place to live. I would go into a bar, and I would start telling the bartender my story. And after about the 3rd day, he'd say, "Why don't you just go drink somewhere else?" You know. And so, or I would go into a bar, and I would go in, and I wouldn't realize I'd been in there before, and the bartender would say, "Amy, right?" And I'd just turn around and leave right away. The animal welfare agency I worked for was called Pets in Need, and my nickname at this time was then Pete's in Need. And I'd be coming down the street, I'd be drunk, and maybe I would have wet my pants or whatever, and you know, I want to borrow a buck, and somebody would see me, "Oh shit, here comes Pete's in Need," and they would just like run. Some guy almost got hit by a car just running across the street to get away from him, so he wouldn't be on the same side of the street. Along the El Camino in Palo Alto, where Stanford University is, there's a whole lot of taverns, and I guess a part of your job if you work in the tavern is to sell both beer and cocaine. And regardless of what tavern you worked in, all the bartenders all lived in the same house in Menlo Park, which looked like a haunted house. And there they took me in, and they let me sleep on the floor with a shaggy dog named Bob. And Bob didn't like sharing the floor with me anymore than I like sharing the floor with him. He'd growl at me and stuff. And every night these guys would come home around 2 in the morning, and they'd bring home all this booze and all these drugs, and we would party. And then in the morning I'd kind of come to, and there's like a sea of people in the room, right? And I'd be, I'm just like way too coked up to sleep. But I'm way too tired from partying all night to get up. But I'm way too coked up to sleep. And it's like purgatory or wherever that is, you know. So I get up and I try to find a can of beer that has some beer left in it and doesn't have a cigarette butt floating in it, you know. And then try to find a cigarette butt. And, you know, when you snort cocaine all night, cigarette butt's not very long. And so I find a little butt, and you let it, you gag because you're hungover, you know, and it's real strong. And then I just go through everybody's pants pockets to try to find some change to start over again. And they'd be like, "Oh, that's probably just Pete's in Need going through our pants pockets again," you know, it's like business as usual. And like I woke up every morning like that for the next year, and I would rather be dead than to live like that again, you know. And then I ended up in Santa Cruz, because even these guys couldn't tolerate putting up with me. So I ended up in Santa Cruz, and I was living in a luxury hotel, the St. George Hotel. It It was a luxury hotel when it was built during the Civil War. It was not a luxury hotel anymore. It was like the Salvation Army pays for you to stay there. Whole place is like on a tilt, you know. You just put an apple on the floor, it just rolls to the wall, you know. You walk to the bathroom like this, and my next door neighbor was Richard. Richard looked like Charles Manson. He had a big ass beard and a tat right here, you know. And I used to love that. Richard used to let me watch him shoot up, which I was so fascinated by. And Richard, he had peanut butter and he had coffee, you know. So when you're on the bum, that's great. And so Richard had lived in Marin County for like 20 years. I finally, Richard, where were you from in Marin County? San Quentin. So I should have known that. So, anyway, I even lost that, and I ended up sleeping outside, and I told my dog Zeke, we were camping Zeke, my golden retriever, and I used to eat in a soup kitchen, but I was so proud that I would, all these like really cute little UCSC co-eds would be working there, and I'd say, yeah, I got to feed these bums, you know, and I'd have some soup myself, you know, so that's sort of, so my cousin Amy lives in Santa Monica. She's a lawyer downtown, and she was a Fulbright fellow, and she's a really smart kid in Harvard Law and all that stuff. And I always thought she was really smart until she said, she always called me Leroy. She said, Leroy, why don't you come down and stay with me, and if you need some place to stay, and I'd like to have you. Well, the way it all started was my Aunt Helen, my mom's sister, really cooked up the scheme because she knew I was homeless, and she just wanted so much to save me, so she talked her daughter into taking me in, my cousin. So I came to Santa Monica. My cousin Eddie met me at the Greyhound station in Oakland and gave me $40, which was a lot of money to me then. And I had everything I owned in a trash bag liner, and I came down. And immediately, they had a bar at the bus station, so I spent that $40. I got drunk so fast. And then I'm outside with my trash bag liner, and my cousin's going around the block and around the block, hoping it's not me standing there. Somehow I remember you being a little taller, she said. Well, whatever. So I came to her house. It was like a nightmare. I sent for my other golden retriever. The dogs looked like they should be in a Humane Society ad. You know, the guy that was keeping them wasn't feeding them, and they dug up her backyard while I drank everything in her house, and you know, it was just horrible. She had these Chinese neighbors, and Zeke and Blondie would jump over the fence and steal all their shoes out of the backyard and bring them over. They put all their shoes out at night, wake up in the morning, they're all in our yard. So the guy, they put up like these punji sticks to hope that they would like impale my dogs. Oh, the stuff, you know. And every day I would go and look for a job. If you gave me a lie detector test, it would show that I really meant to go look for a job. But I couldn't get past the first bar, you know, and it's just how it was. And I want to stop drinking, but I can't stop drinking. I'm really scared. And, you know, the book says we see people drinking. We know we shouldn't drink. They're drinking with impunity. We have a drink. The phenomenon of craving occurs. We pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, vowing to never do it again, and then we do it again. And everybody in this room is destined to die that way unless we find a spiritual solution to our problem. And that's what was wrong with me. I had no defense against the first drink. My cousin went away one week. Oh, my mom sent $1,000 for me to move out of my cousin's house with, which my cousin thought God had sent the $1,000. So my cousin had left for the weekend, and my Aunt Helen, who came from Pennsylvania to sort of supervise my rehab there at my cousin's house, she was back in Pennsylvania. So I had the whole house to myself, and I thought to myself, you know, I wouldn't need this whole $1,000 to move out of my cousin's house. So I had a moving out party, and I got, you know, some cocaine. I got my drug of choice, which was Tanqueray gin, and I got a couple of, I wasn't dating a lot, so I got a couple of dates out of the Yellow Pages, you know, and I had a moving out party. In the morning, I remember I had like 15 cents left of the $1,000, right? I was, oh man, what is my cousin gonna, she's gonna kill me, you know? And we're used to that, you know, people saying, we knew you were gonna screw up, whatever. And I had the worst hangover. I was just thinking, I related to what Mindy was saying about, I used to have really bad hangovers. The worst hangover I ever had. I went in the bathroom to throw up, and it was all blood, you know? And I saw all, you know, my whole life. You know, my grandfather delivered me, and he wanted me to have his medical practice after him. He named me, and I was this altruistic kid that liked everybody, and everybody liked him, and I was a very capable person. I could have done anything I wanted to do in this world, and I was just dying of alcoholism. And I got down on my knees in my cousin Amy's kitchen, and I asked God to help me. The way I felt was I wanted to turn myself in. If there was a warrant out for my arrest, I would have gone and said, you know, I'm a scumbag, I hurt everybody, you know, I just want to turn myself in, you know. So I called AA, and Jim Barracks, I called the central office, and they said, we'll have somebody call you back, and about 3 or 4 minutes later, Jim Barracks called me back. And he said, do you have a problem? And I said, yeah. And he said, where do you live? I said, I live on 10th Street in Santa Monica. He says, so do I. And he came over in about 5 minutes. And he picked me up and he brought me here to the Marina Center. And in those days, they had a restaurant upstairs. And they bought me dinner and they bought me a big book. And we came downstairs here. And when we were holding hands saying the Lord's Prayer, I started to cry, and I knew I was all done gambling. I just knew it, you know. And the book says we need to be badly mangled, and I was badly mangled. You know, if you had all come out on a bus the night before, I wouldn't have come with you. But I was ready. You know, I'd done anything they asked me to do. And so I took to this program like a duck to water. I had 7 commitments. I had a coffee commitment at Ohio Street and had 5 coffee cup pots in the back. My cousin gave me this old car to drive around, and the brakes went out, and I didn't want to tell her because I was afraid she'd take it away from me. So I kept using this parking brake to stop it, and I was riding all around with the 5 coffee pots from Ohio Street in the back, you know, stopping like this. Oh, I was so crazy, you know. I remember when I took a 60-day chip at 26 and Broadway. I gave a rousing 20-minute address, you know, and it took an astronaut, Buzz A, to talk me safely down into my seat, and he told me, "I hope I'm not here when you get 90 days." I hope you're not either. You know, what have you ever done? You know, and so nuts. You know, I got all the jobs you get when you're new. I got a job. I met a guy here, Bobby. He was a tree trimmer. I didn't know he was here in a cord carver. I met him at Beverlywood at the liquor store in the morning. He was drunk as a dog. Just cut any limb down, you know. And there were these 2 prostitutes raked the leaves for him. I had to take him to the methadone clinic every day at noon with the brakes that didn't work, and you know, and I get the job in the boiler room. Hello, Mary, how's everything in Fort Lauderdale today, you know? Well, I talked to you yesterday, and you said if we ever have a sale to call you. Mary, everything is 90% off. Are those the Bics or are those the Papermates? I'll send you out a small order, 1 million pens, you know, those things. And, oh, so hard. And, you know, but I said the 3rd step prayer over and over and over. After about 3 months, my aunt, who loved me very much, came out and told me, she said, you know, your cousin loves you, but it's time for you to leave her house. So I did, and I went over. My sponsor, Ronnie, took me over up here to Claire Foundation. That's where I was to meet this man named Arthur East, who was a very important person in my life. And I went in there, and I was so scared because I knew they didn't have a bed. And I went in the bathroom, and I got down on my knees, and I asked God for them to take me in because I didn't want to be homeless again. And I came out, and Art said to me, well, you might as well know where the coffee is if you're going to live here. Art always knew what to say. He was a real dapper guy. He's about 75 years old, had his hair all permed, wore a neckerchief, nice sport coat all the time. He was just a wonderful guy, and he had worked for Meyer Lansky and done all this stuff in his other life, and all he did was just be of service to guys, and he let me live on the sofa in his office, and every morning he'd come in jingling his keys at 5:30 in the morning. Mr. Pete, time to get up. He taught me stuff, you know. You want to have friends, be a friend, you know. You want to survive in sobriety, mind your own business, you know. Worry about what's in your square. You know, it's not like, you know, I would say, well, you don't understand. Bob asked JJ for a cigarette and he gave him one, and I asked JJ for a cigarette and he said, it's okay, it's not in your square. Just worry about what's in your square. You know, worry about yourself. You know, mind. And he said, you need a car. He gave me his mother-in-law's old car. He said, you need a job. He got me a job working in the liquor store. He said, you need a better job. He got me a job in charge of public relations and fundraising at Claire Foundation. He loved me. It was a wonderful relationship. And so I wanted to be like Art. I rented this house down in Hawthorne, and I took in and I kept new guys there, and they burglarized the neighbors and caught the house on fire, and we had the drug overdoses, and so, you know, I'd take them over to the Robert Kennedy mental facility, and they'd make me belts and stuff, you know, but I stayed sober. And Art was in Santa Monica Hospital. He was really in bad shape, and he would call me up to, the nurses don't know how to fix my pillows, so I'd come up and I'd put up his pillows, you know, 2 pillows one way, 2 pillows the other way. And then he really just wanted to see me, you know. And he had helped thousands of guys like he helped me. And he told me one night, he said, you know, Pete, you're my best friend. And the day that he died, there was a little street drunk named Kenny that always came here, and he died on my front lawn of our disease. And Kenny and I were with him. We were both sober. And Art, it was kind of beautiful because we were able to help Art like he helped us. And I remember once I got this mayor's commendation from the city for something I did, and Art was so proud of me. And I know when I read the eulogy at his funeral that he would have been proud of me. And you know, these are the kind of things, you know, in the book about Bill Wilson, the guy tells in the beginning, the first time I met Bill Wilson, I started talking real fast and real loud, and I thanked him for starting AA, and I thanked him for meeting Dr. Bob and blah, blah, blah. He said, when I finally ran down, Bill just squeezed my hand gently and said, pass it on. You know, and that's what Art did. You know, he passed it on to me. You know, he's a really wonderful person, and We, I was here one time for this meeting, and a guy gave a talk. He gave this great talk. His name was Terry. And at the end, he just mentioned that he had lung cancer and he didn't have long to live, supposedly. So I gave him my card, well, if you ever need me for anything, call me. And sure enough, he needed a couple $100 next week or something. And so I started helping him. And he ended up in the VA. He was really sick. But he was my pal, and every time I went to speak, he'd go with me, and he was really such a good example of our program. When I got to the VA, there were like 3 other guys just like me who also had developed this kind of relationship with Terry, and so we all took care of him. We went every single night for months and months until he died. And I'll tell you, those guys, we're like brothers, those guys and me. As long as we live, we'll always love each other, And these are the kinds of experiences that we get to have here. That Aunt Helen that I told you about, well, first of all, my mom had lung cancer, and I left my business and went home to stay with her, and I almost lost my business because I was gone so long, but it didn't matter because you all taught me first things first, and I got 2 chairs, and I put them together in her hospital room, and I made a bed and put it beside her bed, and I stayed there with her until she died, and she was really proud of me. This is my son. He lives in California. He's very successful. He was very brave and very funny. And then my Aunt Helen I took her to my doctor because she felt sick, and he diagnosed her with lung cancer. And I have been able to be of service to her almost every couple days over the last few months. I'd take her to chemotherapy or take her to dinner or sit with her. And yesterday she died. And I was thinking about how if it wasn't for her, finagling me into my cousin's house, and I wouldn't probably maybe be sober today, But I was able to be there. She was not easy. She was difficult. Let's go have dinner. Whatever restaurant I pulled up in front of, I hate this place, What's the special? Swordfish. I hate swordfish. She was sick, But I was always patient. I never blew it, And I learned that here too, And these are the things. But, and so anyway, I wrote an inventory. It was about this thick. I read it to my sponsor, Howard, upstairs here. Poor Howard. It was like the story of Pete's life, And about every half hour, he'd nod off or something, and then he would go, "You did what?" I say, "I slept with his wife." "Yeah, don't do that again." No, and he'd nod back off again, Oh, shit, I can't believe I told that guy all that stuff. And then the 9th step was really powerful. My worst one was I wrecked my best friend Andy's wedding in Oregon. I wasn't invited to the wedding because they knew I was such a drunk. But I thought, what a nice present for me to just go, So I went up there. And it didn't go too well. Had the sheriff's deputies there. The bride was crying. The bride's mother was crying. The priest was crying. And all the sheriff's deputies were there. And so I don't know. I wanted to add a lot to the wedding, but not exactly in that way. So I thought, if I ever go back to Oregon, they'll just kill me. They'll shoot me. So I went and I found them. And his wife, my friend's wife, came up and gave me a big hug and a kiss. And she said, "When are you going to come and stay with us again? We love you, And that was so healing for me, and all that fear. I'm also and the financial men's is the same way. I'm also a recovering big shot. I'm the sort of guy, if I owe you $1,000, here's $1,000, here's an extra one. I'm an AA now. I could never go to somebody who I owed $1,000 to say, here's $10, I'm going to give you, it just was hard for me. But if I had started early, I'd have been done by the time I was 3 years sober, so it's another thing. What else can I tell you? Oh, I'm also a recovered guru. When I was, 10 years sober or something, I had all these guys. I sponsored about 10 guys, and I made them come to my house every week. They should have called it the Do As I Say and Not As I Do group of AA. I quit doing that about a day before I would have got drunk, and it was kind of embarrassing. I was living in my car back here behind the Marina Center. It's embarrassing when you're a guru and you live in your car, Oh, about my car. Well, there was one time this guy, Tom, who was a lawyer, Tom Engel, he said to me, I wasn't working at the time when I was living in my car. They called my car Pete's Hotel when I stayed back here. And Tom said, Pete, you can get a job as a messenger. You'll drive your hotel around, and you get paid every Friday, So I did. I got a job as a messenger for like these really mean guys in the Pacific Group. And, just like all you need to start a meeting is a resentment in the big book, all you need to start your own messenger service is a resentment in a Thomas guide, And so today I own my own messenger service. I have about 50 employees, 55 employees. I've had it for 10 years now, and it's just great. I have a great life today. I was just like this frog that fell in this big, vat of milk and kept thrashing around because I didn't want to drown and just ended up sitting on a big brick of butter, is how it was for me, and I just never drank and I never gave up. And I will tell you that I've been on the wrong track a lot in sobriety. I always say the peace of mind is my primary purpose, but we get caught up in wanting this and wanting that, and I've got a lot of good things, and I will tell you that none of the stuff ever made me happy. You know, the money, you know, having to have this girl or having to have this much money or whatever, and none of it, whatever I got or didn't get, it never really fixed me. And I think what we really have here, you know, the love that we give to each other and the help that we give to each other, I think is everything in here. And the connection that we make with God. The rest of it is just smoke and mirrors. I think it's a big thing when we get sober. I think it's a big thing when we die. And after that, it's all just a lot of nothing, you know, except for what we have in our hearts, you know. And I find out more and more that when I just say, how can I give love to this situation? How can I bring love to this? What can I give to this? I do great, you know. Happiness isn't just something that happiness is a byproduct of love and service. And also, you know, and when I worry about what's in it for Pete, I'm never happy. It's because it's never enough. And I have a good life today, you know. I meditate, which really helps me a lot. Howard taught me that. I mind my own business in sobriety. I used to run all of West Los Angeles. It was a big job. You have so much to worry about, you know. You know that. You know, you have to work. She shouldn't marry him because he hit her, and he shouldn't work for him because he doesn't pay him enough. And they're identifying as addicts from the podium at 26 and Broadway. They didn't clean the bathroom at the Marina Center. There's so much to keep track of, you know. And one day, you know, I just resigned, you know. I just got up and quit, you know. And it's great, you know. And I used to have high blood pressure. I don't have high blood pressure anymore now that I don't have that job of running all of West LA. And occasionally I'll bump into somebody who does have my old job, and they don't like it any more than I did. Nobody likes, and nobody likes them any more than they like me either, you know. So, I had a really hard. I'm going to talk 2 more minutes and sit down. I had a really the hardest year of my sobriety last year, and you know, it was just, you know, I lived through it, you know, and if you looked at any part of my life, you'd think it's all screwed up. Like I'm not in very good health, and you know, my relationships are still the same, you know, as with Amy. The only time I get to hold these girls' hands during the Lord's Prayer, and you know, I get dropped off at a slow roll now and then in front of my house, and you know, my idea of a long-term relationship, just buying lap dances from the same girl every time you go. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of thing. That's a whole nother story. You know, my business is not that good. But so you would say every part of this guy's life is screwed up, but I'm not screwed up. I'm a really happy whole person, you know, because I'm sober and I have a God in my life, and I have a good relationship with all of you. I will tell you that the people in the room are the most precious commodity that we have in this program. And you know, I've lost so many friends here. So many people are not here anymore. And you just think the person beside you may not even be here next week. And we really have to love each other and take care of each other. And that's where the meaning comes from and the sobriety comes from. I promise you that. I'm going to tell you a real quick story, and I'm going to sit down. When I was homeless in Santa Cruz, I was begging for food at the back door of restaurants, and the one I always went to was this French restaurant because there was a waiter there who was always good for a handout. His name was Ron Keyes. And one day Ron said to me, how would you like to come and be a busboy? No, be a dishwasher at the restaurant. I said, great. So I got a job as a dishwasher at this restaurant. And immediately we were drinking the Dom Perignon and the mums out of the bottle. It was just great, you know. And Ron was brilliant. He could play any musical instrument. He could impersonate anybody better than Richie Little. He was just a genius, but he was a drunk like us. And he said, I live in this house out here in Santa Cruz, up on the hill, and I rent a room in it, and you can sleep on the floor beside my bed, and you don't have to be homeless anymore. Wow, great. So I did, and I would laugh until I cried every night. He was such a funny guy. And one morning he told me, Pete, this room is paid for 3 months. And he said, and you can have it. I'm running away with Katie. Well, first he said, I have some really good news for you. Do you know Katie, the waitress? I said, oh, yes, he's going to tell me she likes me. I should have known better than that. So I'm running away with her tomorrow, you know. So he takes off, and they go to Colorado or something. In the meantime, his wife, who lives across town, his estranged wife, puts all of their kids, these 4 children, these 2 twin 12-year-old girls, a little 9-year-old girl and 6-year-old boy, put them in a cab with a trunk of clothes and a note that said, you son of a bitch, you take care of the kids for a while. And she took off for like God knows where, somewhere else. And there I was in this room with these 4 kids, hideously addicted to alcohol and drugs. And I'm like, wow, you know. But I was happy because I didn't really have any friends except for them, you know. And so every night we didn't have anything to read except Wizard of Oz. So all we read was the Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz, every single night. And the 12-year-old twins, they would roller skate on the boardwalk and say they were orphans and panhandle money that I could drink on, you know. I know that's bad. And And we would, you know. And so I finally, the mother is coming back, you know, and I'm riding off into the sunset on this motorcycle, one in a poker game, or from the Coke dealer, and it won't start. But one of the twins said to me, she said, well, goodbye, Pete. I said, goodbye. She said, don't cry. I said, oh, I'm not going to cry, but I knew I was going to cry. And she said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And she said, I hope you find your way to Oz. And I never forgot that. And, you know, coming into these rooms, I really did, because there's everything in here that we need to have a really happy life. There's no problem. There's no sadness. There's nothing that can't be helped and solved in these rooms. And we're lucky to have it if we just give ourselves to it. And I hope you keep coming back, and I keep coming back, and thanks for listening to me.